Welcome on in, fellow devotees of the JoyToy size creep. This is Screws and Studs, and a while back, I think maybe about a year ago, I decided to do a comparison of the V1 versus V2 and the V3 figures, and I also wanted to let you know what was the difference between those figures, just in case if you decided to buy these action figures and wanted to know which version you had. However, with the release of Lieutenant Titus and his squad, there is now a official version 4. We are going to be going back and comparing versions 1, 2, 3, and now 4 to each other, and also I'm going to tell you how to differentiate between all these different versions of these action figures, just in case if you want to know. So let's dive right on in. All right, ahead of us we have each and every single version of JoyToy action figures that they have released. Although I would have to argue the version 2 and the version 3 are kind of the same, in that the version 3 I labeled as a 2.5, and I still believe that is the case, but regardless I will refer to this as the version 3. Now, the version 1 subject is a Heroes of the Chapter Sergeant. The version 2 is a regular Ultramarines Intercessor. The version 3 is a Stern Guard Veteran. And version 4 is Lieutenant Titus. Now, starting with the helmet area, there really has not been that much of a change with regard to how the helmet attaches to the body, in that JoyToy has always used this ball and socket joint as displayed by the V1 figure, and you can see the same ball joint on the V2 as well. However, when we focus in on the body section where the head attaches, there's a significant difference between the V1 and the V2 through 3, in that the well where the head sits gets a lot deeper. So you will see on the V1 it is a pretty deep well, then it gets a lot more shallow on the V2 and the V3, and finally there is a very large well for Titus's head on the V4. Now, some of you may ask, what version figure do I have? The biggest way that you can tell the difference is in the pauldron area. This is a version 1 arm, and you can see that this is a very tiny peg that attaches to the body of the action figure, and this is the ball joint that actually attaches to the pauldron, as you can see, this connection right here. Then unfortunately, with the version 2 and the version 3, with the version 2 in my hand right now, JoyToy had migrated to this tab right here that has a loop that goes around the shoulder peg, and this is the same case with version 3. And then there is a huge departure for the version 4, and I'll have to say the version 4 actually is quite similar to the version 1, in that this area of the pauldron you can move around, and this ball joint attaches to this socket area. And this configuration, in my opinion, is the superior way of attaching the pauldron to the shoulders. And of note, this is what Titus's shoulder area looks when it has been unscrewed and taken apart, with this area attaching to the pauldron and this area attaching to the shoulder. So since the version 2 and the version 3 are very similar to each other, you may ask, how are you going to tell the difference? Well, the proof is in the hands. I'll let you know that the V2 hands are as stiff as a corpse. It is very hard to get these hands open, so that is your first indication that you have a V2, and I'm really struggling to get this thing open right now. On the V3 hands, however, it is a lot more pliable. As you can see, I am actually moving these hands out like this. I can bend them, and they're a lot bigger. So up top is a version 2 hand, and down here is a version 3 hand. You will notice in this version 2 hand that the index finger, or the trigger finger, doesn't actually wrap 100% around this bolt pistol. It doesn't sit very well as displayed by this gap here. Now, if you place this bolt pistol handle in the version 3, it fits in like a glove like this, and the index finger does actually wrap around the trigger. So this is one test that you can figure out of version 2 versus version 3. Interestingly enough, you will notice that the size of the arms of these action figures, or more specifically the length of the arms of these action figures, hasn't really increased that much over time. The elbow joint on these action figures do get a little bit bigger over time. Once again, this version 1 being the absolute smallest. This is a version 2 one, and all of them use this double jointed connector, which have pegs at the end of them If you're interested in seeing how this section attaches to this part as well as this part, then go see my Blood Angels Legion Prayer Tour near complete teardown video, and you will get the 411 on how this area attaches. So anyways, on the V1 action figure, this peg inserts directly into the body of the Marine. However, there's a complete design change in that the peg of the subsequent action figures insert into this black loop area here. And this black loop area allows more lateral movement towards the chest area. And you will notice that this is actually on maximum extension for the version 2. And then over time, the extension improves drastically, where this one is the version 3 and it's bent a little bit more forward. And then on Titus's body, this is bent actually the most forward out of all 4 of them. With regard to how the torso attaches the body, this is the V1 action figure, and it uses a loose ball and socket joint in which you can actually remove this ball joint. However, on the version 2 and the version 3, this ball joint is affixed to the body with a gigantic ball at the end of it. And I really apologize for Titus's in that I could not get the chest separated from the torso area, so I didn't really feel like breaking an action figure that I'm really attached to. Anyway, during the video I had stated that Titus's chest is hollow sounding. And I know this is very, very hard to see right here, but if you actually look through this shoulder connector joint, you will see actually the top of this torso area, which then proves that this place is indeed hollow, whereas the previous generations, this area is just solid plastic. And now looking at the torso area, you will notice that there is no black socket connector. This is just, this ball and socket just connects directly to this torso area. Whereas in the subsequent generations, there's this black ring here. And the same goes for the bottom of the torso area for these action figures, including Titus. And now that we have detailed the upper body of these action figures, let's move on to the lower one. All right, again, we have the version 1 figure, version 2 here, version 3, and version 4. So this is a side-by-side display of the T-shaped ball joint connectors, in which this top area attaches to the torso and these 2 ball joints attach the legs. You will notice that the T-shaped ball joint from version 1 through 3 is the exact same. However, you will notice that on the version 4 one, the size changes dramatically. This one that Titus uses is found in some Terminators, which shows you exactly how wide Titus's hips are compared to previous generations. Now, this hip area has always had this kind of like saddle type of area where the T-joint sits. You will notice that the shape will evolve over time. It will appear that this version 1 kind of loosely cradles the joint. The version 2 barely holds it and is probably the loosest out of all of the 4. Then this saddle becomes a lot more narrow on the version 3, and it seems to almost suffocate the joint because the fit is so snug. And the same goes for the saddle area for Titus's waist. Looking at the legs, there is a drastic difference between the length of this area. In fact, this area is the exact source of the size creep that a lot of you have been lamenting. With each subsequent version, both the thigh area as well as the lower leg region increases in size, with the version 1 being so comically small compared to Titus's leg. And this is the side-by-side comparison between the version 1 and Titus's leg. So just like the elbow joint, the knee joint is double jointed on all of them, and the back of the knee doesn't seem to evolve over time. However, the front of the knee, as displayed here, does. This version 1 has this peg where the knee attaches, and you can actually remove this area if it's loose. The same can be said of the version 2. It still has this knee area with a peg on it. The V3 one is very different, with the knee that is integrated with the plastic, and the same goes for the version 4. The next thing I'll talk about is this ankle joint. The version 1 sports a very small peg joint, which is not very good and led to a lot of instability in the figures while they were standing up. Then they migrated to your standard ball and socket joint on the version 2 and the version 3, as well as the version 4. This is the bottom area where the peg for the ankle attaches to the lower leg, and this is an example of the same area, but again, like I said, they have migrated to a ball and socket joint on the V2 and V3. Finally, we have arrived at the foot or the feet of the figures, and you will notice that there is an increase in foot size over time, with the V1 being the smallest, the V2 and V3 being the same size, and the V4 being the largest. And now we have finished the show and tell section of this video. Follow me to the end where we will draw some conclusions. All right, members of the chapter, I hope that you found this video to be informative as to how to basically differentiate between a version 1, version 2, version 3, and finally a version 4 figure, just in case if you decide to buy an action figure and you're like, I wonder what version I got. So for the most part, I think most of you are probably going to get a version 3 figure and now a version 4. The version 1s are definitely not produced. The version 2s are getting a little bit more rare to find. And obviously JoyToy has been making version 3 Warhammer 40K figures as well as Horus Heresy action figures. And if you have enjoyed this informative video, please subscribe to this channel if you have not, and smash that like button. And if you are wanting to pick up these action figures, there's only one place, in my opinion, where you should be picking them up, and that is at David Toys. So click on the link in the description below, or you will be brought to their website. At the end of each and every single one of these videos, I do sing praises to them, and they rightfully have earned that right because I've had an awesome customer experience with them. And before you check out, do not forget to use the code SNS to receive 12% off of your purchase. All right, members of the chapter, if you want to see more of these types of videos, please let me know in the comment section below, and I will gladly take up about 8 to 10 minutes of your time so that you can be more informed. So I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.